Imagine this. You wake up one morning to find your Jeep missing, but not because a thief stole it. No, it was taken by an HOA Karen who thought she was above the law. What she didn't know was that the Jeep didn't belong to just anyone. It belonged to an undercover police task force. Daniel had lived in his quiet suburban neighborhood for almost 6 years. He wasn't the type to bother anyone. He kept his lawn tidy, paid his dues, waved politely to neighbors, and minded his business. The only thing that stood out in his driveway was his black Jeep Wrangler. At first glance, it looked like a regular rugged off-road vehicle, but what no one knew was that the Jeep doubled as a surveillance unit for a local police task force. Daniel wasn't a cop himself, but he worked as a trusted contractor for law enforcement, maintaining their fleet of undercover vehicles. His Jeep wasn't just a car. It was fitted with hidden cameras, encrypted radios, GPS tracking, and even a disguised compartment for specialized gear. It wasn't technically his, but the task force allowed him to keep it at home since he was responsible for its upkeep. To Daniel, the Jeep was more than just a machine. It symbolized responsibility, trust, and his late father, who had been a police officer himself. Every time Daniel turned the key, he felt like he was carrying on a piece of his father's legacy. But to one woman in the neighborhood, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, this Jeep was an eyesore that didn't fit her vision of the perfect cul-de-sac. Her name was Karen Mitchell, and she had declared war. Karen wasn't officially the HOA president. No, that role had technically expired months ago when the last election failed to draw enough votes. But in her mind, titles didn't matter. She acted as though the neighborhood was her personal kingdom. She sent passive-aggressive emails about trash cans being left out too long. She fined kids for drawing chalk art on the sidewalks. She even tried to ban a neighbor's Christmas decorations because the lights were too bright. When her eyes landed on Daniel's Jeep, she decided it was her next target. She began by leaving bright orange violation notices on his windshield. Unregistered vehicle. Unauthorized modifications. Unsightly appearance not consistent with HOA standards. Daniel, used to her antics, ignored the notes. He knew the Jeep was fully registered and maintained. Besides, the HOA rules didn't even prohibit Jeeps. But Karen wasn't the type to give up. One chilly Thursday morning, Daniel left for work in his second car, a quiet silver sedan. The Jeep stayed locked behind a heavy-duty chain in the driveway, its tires secured because Daniel knew Karen had been sniffing around. That afternoon, while Daniel was gone, Karen marched down the street with bolt cutters in hand. 2 of her HOA committee friends followed, filming the whole thing as if it were some kind of heroic neighborhood operation. "Today, we restore order," she declared proudly. She walked straight up to the Jeep, snapped the lock with the bolt cutters, and grinned like she just conquered Rome. With the help of a tow truck she had secretly arranged, paid for with HOA funds, no less, she ordered the Jeep to be hooked up and hauled away to a private impound lot. "Finally, no more eyesores in my neighborhood," she smirked. But Karen had just made the worst mistake of her life. That evening, when Daniel returned home and found his Jeep gone, his stomach dropped. He immediately called the police, not just to report a theft, but to alert the task force. Within hours, unmarked police SUVs rolled into the neighborhood. Officers in plain clothes knocked on Daniel's door, asking for every detail. "This isn't just about a stolen Jeep," one officer told him grimly. "That vehicle contains sensitive equipment. If anyone tampers with it, they could compromise an ongoing operation." Daniel could hardly believe it. His crazy HOA nemesis had no clue what she had just dragged away. The next day, Karen couldn't resist bragging. At the local coffee shop, she loudly told anyone who would listen about her victory over the Jeep. "I had to personally cut the lock myself," she said, puffing her chest. "That man thinks he's above the rules. Not in my neighborhood. We got it towed away, and he'll pay dearly to get it back." Unfortunately for her, one of the people sipping coffee nearby was an off-duty detective. He knew all about the task force's Jeep and immediately contacted his unit. Within hours, Karen's little boast had turned into a federal-level problem. Police decided not to rush in immediately. Instead, they used Karen's arrogance against her. They traced the Jeep to the impound lot, where Karen had demanded it be held until Daniel paid thousands in HOA violation fees. What she didn't know was that officers were already monitoring the lot, recording her every move. Karen showed up in her pearl necklace and oversized sunglasses, barking orders at the tow yard staff. She even tried climbing into the Jeep herself, tugging at the dash like she owned it. That was the final straw. In one swift move, undercover officers surrounded the lot. Sirens wailed. Karen was caught on camera sitting inside a police task force Jeep, holding a screwdriver as if she was about to pry something open. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle," an officer commanded. Karen scoffed. "Do you know who I am? I'm the HOA president." The officer replied coldly, "Ma'am, you're under arrest for theft of government property, tampering with police equipment, and obstruction of justice." News spread like wildfire. The headline the next day was almost too good to be true. Local HOA woman arrested after stealing police task force Jeep. Neighbors laughed, cried, and shook their heads. Some said it was karma. Others admitted they were relieved someone had finally stood up to Karen. Daniel's phone buzzed nonstop with messages of support. People dropped by with food, cards, and even homemade signs that read, "Justice for the Jeep." As for the police, they quietly thanked Daniel for his cooperation. The task force assured him they'd handle the rest. Karen faced multiple charges and lawsuits, including misuse of HOA funds. The funniest part? When she tried to argue in court that she was just enforcing neighborhood rules, the judge burst out laughing. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's neighborhood transformed. Without Karen's iron grip, the HOA was restructured under new leadership. For the first time in years, kids could ride bikes freely, families decorated their yards however they wanted, and no one cared about unsightly Jeeps. Daniel eventually returned the task force Jeep, but the officers surprised him with a gift, a brand new Jeep of his own, complete with custom plates that read, "HOWHO?" Every time Daniel drove it past the cul-de-sac, neighbors cheered. And though he would never forget the stress Karen caused, he couldn't help but laugh. Because in the end, the woman who tried to control everything ended up losing it all, thanks to a Jeep she thought was just another eyesore.